Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Welsh Republic podcast, episode number 18. And I am here with my guest, Tara. How are you doing today, Tara?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
What have you been up to today?
Life has its challenges. I do have a friend that's currently hospitalized with kidney failure. So everyone take the moment to always, put your health forward, do the checks that you need to do, and make sure, eat healthy, work out, and do all the things that are preventative is the message I would say from that. But I've been spending the last week at the hospital bedside to one of my best friends.
Yeah, you told me. I hope he gets well soon. I'm really sorry to hear that he's going through a hard time. So tell me about yourself, Tara. What got you involved in politics and going outside to speak to people with all the rallies you go to?
It's kind of interesting because I actually studied political science and I have my undergraduate is in political science and I have a master's in communication, which focused on journalism and public relations. But it's not the field I went into professionally. I ended up going into management consulting, and I did that for several years in New York. And I hardcore just did not like being at my desk, and I took off traveling for almost two and a half years, backpacking through the world. And now I've visited almost 60 countries. And what really brought me back to the States was COVID. So I got back the day before COVID was announced as a pandemic. And 2020, we saw everything that was happening on the news, and it forced you to be political if you were not. And so though I was not political for all the years after college, I became political just simply by stating my opinion, which I didn't even think about it from a political perspective, but everybody was attacking me for having an opinion. And I'm like, since when can I not have an opinion, but everybody else can? So this kind of launched me then into the political world, because I'm not the type of person who backs down when I'm told to shut up. I get louder. And I'm also a truth finder. So I started going out to the protests and talking to people and finding out what is really going on the ground, because I was not trusting what I was hearing on mainstream media. And this launched me into just doing citizen journalism, starting to stream from my phone. And I think that's also the beauty of the technology that we have these days. We can really disseminate information without having to be, a Fox News anchor.
I saw your latest video where you were visiting latest videos where you're visiting, talking to people who the victims of the Buffalo shooter parents, the victims who got shot, the parents of the victims. Sorry if my pronunciation is wrong. What did you learn from that?
So this, prior to this week, I was up in Buffalo and then found myself in Uvalde. So to be in and around two massive shootings was truly a surreal experience. And then also trying to just talk to people as much as I can to understand, also from, an emotional human perspective, because this truly impacts, it truly impacts all of our lives, especially with the violence that we have in the U.S.
And I saw where you were speaking, how could this happen? Why did the FBI just watch? And it's true. There's been a lot of studies that apparently these two guys were on the same Discord. They were chatting to one another. There was also evidence that the FBI had visited him 7 times. And to hear that, what is your emotion towards that?
It's interesting. After I started connecting online to what information was floating out there, people were asking me about, in a sense, I don't want to call them conspiracy theories, but they were asking me, is there really dead children? And I'm like, I'm here. I can verify that there are certainly dead children that are here. I'm talking to the parents and experiencing their and seeing their grief. As I dig deeper on the ground, and to your point, it is known fact now that the two shooters, these two 18-year-old shooters, were in the same chat room. So they're experiencing the same kind of, in a sense, radicalization, and amounted to the same type of action. I did read through the Buffalo's the manifesto that the Buffalo shooter had, and it was scary, but it mirrored a lot of also the Christchurch shooting. And to find out that they were in the same to be in the
Yeah,
same room. He said that he wanted
actually.
to target. He wanted to focus on Black, but he would also want to focus on
By the
Latino.
way, just to
And
let you know, he actually, one of the shooters actually had a symbol that actually represented the army of Ukraine, who resembled the symbol of the Azov Battalion, which is actually a Nazi symbol.
Mhm.
And that right there, and also the shooter in New Zealand also took inspiration from a lot of the far right group in Ukraine, Azov Battalion too. You know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's connections. There's certainly connections that are out there. Like, and I think as we continue to dive deeper and we'll be able to see more of these connections. I feel like there are people who try to stop us from talking and connecting the dots together. Even as a journalist in Uvalde, I had a sense that people were trying to not the families. The families were actually pretty, in my experience, were easier to talk to in the sense of they were not trying to get the journalists out. But I felt from an authority standpoint, like you could not take a step onto the street without a police officer kind of like yelling at you. And it was like I was even my colleague was invited to one of the funerals, and so when we had gone to the funeral, we were looking for the woman who was the aunt of one of the children that had died. When we couldn't find her, we were asking we talked to the uncle and he gave us direction, but when we couldn't find her, we saw there were signs everywhere that said no journalists, and so we wanted to clear and make sure that we were okay to be present. So we went actually to the office of the funeral home, and we disclosed like we're journalists, but we were invited. Like here's we had photographed proof of that, and but we see the signs that say no journalists. So we just want to let you guys know that we are here. We were invited, so that way there's not a problem, and to get clearance for that. And so she's like, oh, I have to go talk to like the funeral director, and I'm like. And she told us to wait there. We're like, we don't want to be disrespectful by any means. So we'll go wait outside in the car. And then, so we're just parked right outside. If you want to like get us and let us know, like we just want to be at most respectful. And so when we're almost at the car, the guy comes at us and then says like, if you show up here again, like you're going to have a trespassing charge. And I'm like, like as a person, we operate in the most respectful manner, and the proper protocol, but it was immediately met with like, you show up here again, you'll get a trespassing charge. And so which then the next day after I had left, I also saw other reporters who were being basically bullied by a biker gang that was there. And so what I find interesting about this is a police officer doesn't have the right to violate your First Amendment rights. Like people can be in
Absolutely
public
not.
spaces.
It is absolutely outrageous. And for those police officers to tell you that you can't go in there, but other reporters can. And is
Yeah.
it funny because you have mainstream media outlets, people being allowed to go there, but independent journalists are, and it's just pretty much they just want people to follow the narrative and not question.
Yeah, because
your
like
narrative.
it's the independent individuals who are going to be asking the questions, and journalists in general are going to ask the questions. But I got the feeling they didn't want us asking any questions. And then also when we were present at several of the press conferences, you could see before the narrative before the media was focused on the changing story of the police officers, we were able to hear it, and it like begged the questions from the first day that I was there outside of Robb Elementary School. Literally, when it's still the neighbors were saying that there's still children inside, is at the point that I even showed up outside of Robb Elementary School. So I have an interview that I was just watching as I'm editing through my footage the other day, and so even one of the I'm not exactly sure which police officer this was, but I don't want to say he was the sheriff, but maybe. I have to go back and verify his identity, but he came out and he spoke to the press in an informal press conference in a little bit kind of way. But his story then changed the next day too, because he was talking about how the police were inside, they were taking fire from the shooter from inside of the school, and then a couple like a day or so later, you see the footage of the parents outside the school and wanting to go inside when the police were standing down and not going inside. Even in talking to some of the neighbors who witnessed the parents outside, they said that the parents were becoming also very upset because they were seeing some of the police officers being able to go and get their own children, but then they couldn't get their own.
Well, that's absolutely ridiculous, because if the parents want to go in and pretty much risk their lives to, save their kids, kids is the most important thing. And I think these savages to kill kids is just horrible. No children should be killed, And it's just crazy, you know, especially with the crisis we live in now and the world we live in now where there's so much mental illness. It's just, you know, guns are there to protect people. And isn't it funny, basically, how, you know, the ones with states with like the most gun control are the ones that pretty much, you know, have the most violence, but the ones with the less gun control actually don't have a lot of violence. So you look at countries like Switzerland, Finland, and Sweden, they have a lot of gun ownership, but they don't have the amount of crime because they don't have a lot of mental illness. It's not the guns that are the problem, it's mental illness that is the problem.
I definitely agree with that. But the interesting thing too is like when I'm thinking of New Zealand, didn't they pass like a stringent gun control after the
they
New
did.
Zealand?
They did, like with arms. Not a lot of people listened to it, but some people did. And you know, you got to remember when they did in Australia in the 90s, when they took the guns away from Australia, they did bought backs. You know, they gave people money for pretty much, you know, stuff. And if that's the fact, you know, that's not good, because if you look at Australia with the COVID pandemic, look what happened to it. It became a communist state. You know, we're pretty much in the power. Well, not all of Australia did, but it was mostly Melbourne and New South Wales. But Western Australia is more, you know, Western. But it is,
and that
crazy.
would be my concern when you're disarming the people. Like my dad, who's a communist refugee, when he even talked about how Russia fell into communism with when they took down the Tsar in the Bolshevik Revolution, he said the first thing they started off with was disarming the people. And so, like, in a sense, like if you're disarming the people, are you going to have less of the shootings within the community? Sure, but then you're going to have incidences when a government can then take on this tyrannical role, and you're not going to have a way of fighting back. You're not going to be able, because you're not going to have a way of fighting back. And then the unique case in America, we've got over 400 billion guns. Like there is not going to be a buyback program that is going to
it's absolutely outrageous.
It's just not gonna happen.
Well, you know what's crazy? They're trying to. Obama tried it. Bush tried it. Well, maybe not Bush, but Bush is still a globalist puppet. Clinton tried it. And you know what? It never worked. And if Biden ends up happening, I can guarantee you 7076 is going to commence again, like Alex Jones said.
Yeah.
And if that ends up happening, especially, you know, with them trying to take away so many like 4-point guns, like there's going to be civil war. And even if like China, Russia invaded, you know, United States would be able to defend itself because it's such a strong country, you know, like.
And that's a very true fact, like what you just mentioned. Like part of the reason that during World War II, why mainland USA was not targeted by the Japanese, and they decided to strike at Pearl Harbor, is if you go into mainland America, like chances are every American household is going to be having a gun for the most part. So people have the ability to always defend themselves. And so regardless of you know, the military presence, that America does have a strong military, but you have individual civilians that are also armed and able to defend themselves. And, you know, you're able to, like, that I think needs to stay true from domestic or foreign
by the way,
threats.
I used to actually think the reason why Japan didn't invade United States is because it was too far for them.
You know, they could have ran out of fuel. Today with fuel prices how they are, they'd probably make the decision to still stay to stay in Hawaii and not make it all the way to mainland. They're like, oh, it's going to be too expensive with the fuel costs.
Russia and China could get to United States quite quick, because especially when you look at the way things move so quickly in the world. But I also think when you mention, you know, now as back to the Buffalo shooting, with the Buffalo shooting, when you spoke to the parents, when you saw their emotion in their face, what was it like for you?
I'm an empath, so it was actually very difficult to be in and around the environment of people who are grieving, because I don't have to experience it myself to take on the emotions and feel what they're feeling. So it was very challenging for me to be there. And of course, like then immediately going into Uvalde, which was not at all what I was planning. I was there to go to the border and cover the border crisis.
Oh, the border crisis is crazy.
Yeah, so I actually landed into San Antonio, and as soon as I turned on my phone, I was getting calls from other journalists letting me asking, "Hey, are you in San Antonio or close by?" I'm like, "Yes, I just landed." They're like, "There's an active shooter an hour away from you." So it was challenging for me as a person, but also for the path that I'm taking with even what I present on social media. A lot of this is like is documenting my own growth and experience. So I felt massively uncomfortable, but to me that is a sign that I'm growing as a person, and a lot of it is because I'm I'm trying to learn more about the issues that are impacting Americans on the ground level. I do want to search for a solution. I am interested in running for Congress in the future, but before I can even hit that point of running for political office, I want to have tangible ideas that I could be presenting forward to be helping people. So a lot of what I'm doing is like presenting, yes, the truth of what I'm seeing, but it's for me to also gain an understanding to what's going on in America and how I can do my part to be
Well, you're
helpful.
doing more than a lot of the Congress members are, like Nancy Pelosi, because you don't see them going out like pretty much seeing the problems, you know, which is absolutely outrageous. Here in New Zealand, what actually happened is we had a boxer, a famous boxer in Auckland, who ended up getting punched by gang leaders. And if you look at central Auckland, the street, it's so dangerous there. You've got like street beggars, street this, and he ended up getting punched and he ended up collapsing on the street and he ended up dying. And this was because of a rival gang. And one of the family members said to the Minister of Justice here, hey, look, come down to City Central and I'll show you how dangerous it is. And it's like he doesn't even care, you know, the Justice Minister. And it's just like how in America, you know, these politicians don't go out, they don't speak to people, you know, and when you speak about, for example, your friend Mr. Bill, you know, Mr. Bill, he goes out and talks to people. You go out and talk to people. Also, you know, like people like Savannah Hernandez, Laura Sundin, they also go out and talk to people, you know, and I think there needs to be more of that journalism like they used to have back in the old days. But if the mainstream media does none of it.
Yeah, and also like when I just started also comparing what was on the mainstream media, and then also like in terms of like the political world, I started watching the full press conferences and compared them to the headlines that were coming out immediately afterwards. And I'm like, wait, that press conference had nothing to do with that. Like that's the headline coming out of a press conference that talked about the Abraham Accords. So I'm like, all right, you know, it was an aha moment for me that we're being lied to, which when I said that to people, they're like, of course, Sarah, we're being lied to. I'm like, I know I'm late to the game, but yeah, like we are seriously being lied to. So when I was in Buffalo, I thought it was an interesting point that I'm going to highlight is when I talked to the community, people who were members of the community versus people who came from out of town to be there. And they had a difference in perspective. So the way the mainstream media was playing out the Buffalo shooting to be was about white supremacy. And it was in terms of like what was documented in his manifesto and really it's like hitting bingo basically of all the points that the mainstream media cares about to make something into a national story. Buffalo had all those ingredients for that recipe. But with white supremacy is the, you know, racial hatred and divide. If you talk to the residents and locals of Buffalo, their message was so very different than people who came out. Like you had BLM travel from California and from Virginia, a couple other local like leaders or state leaders had come in for the vigil. And then you even had the Black Israelites that had come in. So you had different collections of people that were all in this block in front of Tops. And then the members of the local community who had lost their parent or their sister or somebody in that, like they were actually trying to get out. They were asking the police to make like the Black Israelites leave because they didn't like the message that they were spreading. They were trying to say to hate the white man. And so the Black members of the community who experienced losing their family didn't even like that messaging that mainstream media and other people from out of town were coming in and trying to propagate.
There is definitely, you know, like Black supremacy. You know, if you look at like the shooter in New York, you know, pretty much that was a Black supremacist who did that. And it's not just a problem. White supremacy, there are shooters who do that from white supremacy. There's Black shooters, you know, who do a lot of Black supremacy shootings. And it's crazy, you know, like.
Everything is meant to be stoking this racial divide, and that's why the media highlights why stories. Watch when something becomes a story and how fast it drops off. If it doesn't fit into this mainstream media narrative, it's going to drop off pretty fast. And so, like, if the Buffalo shooter was not white, then I'm not trying, and don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not negating the lives that were lost on that day by any means, but this story would not have gotten the coverage that it did. And so because we had even the Tulsa shooting occurred right after Uvalde. I was in Houston to be flying out the next day. I hear Tulsa's going on and I'm like, should I head over to Tulsa? And so these and the subway shooting that you were alluding to, when he targeted like Latino and Asians, like that was black supremacy. You had in Wisconsin the man who was a black supremacist and plowed through all those people during a Christmas parade targeting white people. Like these are stories that will hit a headline, but then they'll quickly fizzle. And whether or not, you know, Biden will go and visit these places also begs the question. Like when I was actually very happy that Biden had come out to Uvalde, and I'm not a Biden supporter, but I am a supporter of America. And so in people trying to heal and unify, like it's the first time that a president has come and visited the community. So I'm thankful that he took the time to come out there. But, you know, it does, from a journalistic standpoint, I'm like, all right, so, but he didn't go and visit Wisconsin when the black supremacists had killed all the white people. So, you know, you guys have to question the narrative always.
It's hypocrisy. And he's nothing but a puppet to the elite. Of course, he's going to follow the narrative, because if he didn't, he would get told off by them.
You know, and seeing him in person, I was probably 20 feet away from him during the when he visited the school, Robb Elementary School, and he's so frail looking that I'm, you know, I'm so dementia.
He's got dementia.
Jill was holding him up. Yeah, Jill was holding him up, walking by, and so when the crowd did cheer. I will stand by that statement. The crowd did cheer, and you guys can see it in my footage. When I posted saying that, everyone was like, "Oh, they're not cheering," and I'm like, "They did cheer." They booed immediately when Abbott showed up. But when Biden was then leaving into the car, and the crowd was like crying out, saying, "We need help. Our children don't deserve to die like this. Our children don't deserve to die. We need help, Mr. President. Please help us." And he just gives a thumbs up as he's getting into the car. And I'm like, I don't think he even heard what the crowd was saying. They were pleading. They were begging for help. You had the community begging him for help. And he's just like, all right, guys. So I don't know what's the right response. Like I personally would have gone over there and talked, but you know, he wasn't allowed to approach people and talk. Right after he had a service immediately after in Sacred Heart Catholic Church, and we were told that he was going to come through our path to answer some questions and talk to people. I was actually surprised when they said he's going to answer questions, because I'm like, he never answers questions. And so I was surprised he was going to come our way. But then at the last minute, they deflected and had him just immediately go to the car and not even approach the people. So it's good that he had come to visit and support the community, because with his visit, if he snaps his finger, this community will get the resources it needs. And that's the importance of the visit. So whether or not one community gets a visit versus another community, not, you know,
like when you just said to me that he just put his fingers up and then everybody was saying to help them. Yeah, that's demonic, man. You know, a lot of people going about conspiracy theorists, basically how, well, you know, it's not Biden. He's not the one in charge. It's the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the bankers. You know, they're the ones who pretty much, you know, run the whole story. And I think, you know, if Trump was there, he would have been like, "We will be there for you. We will protect you." You know, personally, I have my doubts of Trump too. There are kind of things that I don't agree with him, and personally, I prefer Ron Paul over Trump. But I do think Donald Trump would have definitely, you know, done more things than he would have. And I think, you know, a president should go there, but the problem is the president of the United States right now is nothing but a puppet. How long do you think until Joe Biden gives in? Because a lot of people are predicting Kamala Harris is going to take over. And who do you think is going to be Kamala Harris?
You know, Kamala's going to be worse. Kamala's going to be worse. So I don't want Kamala to be our president if something happens to Biden. So I'm actually praying for Biden's health to hold through. This is like the worser of what's worse of the two evils. But I do not want to see Kamala in charge, like especially when she was doing her European tour during when she was trying to show support for
absolutely embarrassing.
It was embarrassing. Like I didn't think it could get worse after her press conference with the Polish president with Duda, but it got worse when she went to Romania. And so she's never even visited the border. Like nobody, like you have individual citizens like myself who are going and visiting the border to get the true story and understand.
Yep,
like I'm going to understand what's going on. And she doesn't even do it. Like, I'm surprised, like, in a sense, like, they were so close. Uvalde is an hour away from Eagles Pass, which was going to be the center of when Title 42 was set to expire originally. That was going to be the center of a lot of stuff happening. And but to be just so close and you couldn't carve out, like, it's an hour's drive. You couldn't even go and see the border for yourself. I'm like, how are our politicians supposed to be providing any true solutions when you don't talk to the regular people who are on the ground experiencing things?
And you know what the answer is?
Puppets.
Yeah, they're puppets to the elite. They're puppets to the bank. That's why we need to get rid of the Federal Reserve Act and the Act of 1871, which is very, very important. And I think, it's just how corrupt it is. The system is just broken, So speaking of the shootings, what was your most crazy experience when going out, viewing things in a political rallies? What is your most crazy experience you ever had?
In these two shootings or in general?
Yeah, in general.
In general, okay. So like, I got a crash course into citizen journalism. I was in DC for a couple of months in 2020. I had gone there for a walkaway march with Brennan Starka. And so this is when I first started becoming political, and I went to my first Trump rally literally a week before that. And so that's what launched me into, because at DC, like, you meet people, and so the figures that I would see on media, I'm like, wow, like, you're 5 feet away from me. So I would go and talk to them, and I had my Sony, so I would whip it out and say, can I interview you? And so just as a citizen, I started doing that. So with that, I met, Proud Boys. The first time I heard about the Proud Boys was literally 2 weeks prior to that, when Trump mentioned them during the debate. And then and I met Bevelyn Beatty, who she had protested BLM with splashing paint on the mural. And so
that's really cool. Is she the girl who did that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's really cool.
So I was just being out and about, like, in COVID lockdowns, they try to keep you all in. But so I decided to go out and with meeting these people, and learning more about what is going on in America, like, it made me care. It's one thing. And so when I started doing citizen journalism, I think the most craziest experience I had it was actually not January 6th. I was in DC on January 6th, but a couple of days later, there was going to be another march. Patriots were going to be marching in New York. So I was in New York. The Patriot side had canceled their march to, in a sense, J6 has just happened. And so they decided to cancel their march, but Antifa had announced a counter march or counter protest to that march, which they called an anti-racist march. Mm-hmm. And so this was among my earliest encounters of Antifa. And so I was live streaming the event, and they were bullying and harassing several of the journalists in Madison Square Park. And so they turned their attention to me, and they told me to turn off my camera, and I said no. So that's when, like, a mob of like 30 people came after me and attacked me. So that was probably my most crazy experience. They sprayed chemical spray on me, like, they covered me with the umbrellas, they hit me with a skateboard.
And that's absolutely terrible.
It was terrifying. And what was probably more shocking to me is like I was told to, like, back the blue. And so I see police and I'm like, oh my God, police. I start running across the street to get to the police. They point away from me and they say, stand 6 feet away. And I'm like, literally, when they pointed and told me to get away from them, I ran up to them saying, I'm being assaulted. I was hit with a skateboard. Yeah. They hit me with chemical spray they were spitting at me, hitting me with umbrellas and egg on my head, like all of that. And the police then told me 6 feet away. And they literally, like, I was trying to embed myself in the police line to get away from this mob of like 30 people that were chasing after me, and the police would walk away from me. And so I was like, what is going on? And that's also when I learned, in terms of like back the blue, I'm back the blue to a degree, except for if whoever's in charge, because they're going to only be executing the orders from above. So I don't hold like the individual police accountable for not helping me on that day, whatever orders that they had. But at the same time, I'm like, just use some common sense thought. Also with, you know, the Uvalde police that were standing outside, use some common sense thought, even if they were being told one thing from like the police miscommunication breaking down, but they were standing outside and parents are willing to go inside. Like, even if you're going to be functioning as a unit, like, we're still human at the end of the day, and you can use your own brain to figure out what is right and what is wrong. So that was also among the most shocking things that I had experienced as a journalist, and it made me just to be more vocal and go cover more events. It didn't shut me down.
So Tara, is there anything else you would like to say?
You know, thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak on your platform and talk about like the events really of the last week. Like, I encourage everybody to be able, if you're able to go to events, go out there, go out to protests and go connect to other people. Like, even when Vernon Jones was talking at the NRA protest, he came and addressed the people. I'm like, I was not impressed with the things that he was saying to the people, but the protesters, even the ones that were anti-gun, were at least proposing some sort of solutions. Whether they're right or wrong, you know, that needs to be evaluated in itself, but at least they're proposing some solutions, versus our politicians are just saying, hey, let's talk about it. You know, we're done with talking about the issues that we have here in America. We need actual solutions. And I think a start of it is going to be in connecting with people,
fixing the mental health problem. That's the problem.
Focusing on mental health. Like, that's an actual solution that can be put into place. And, you know, like these politicians, they're just pandering for re-election. Like, vote them out and put actual true, from America's perspective, true America first candidates out there, and get the guys who actually have solutions. And from a regular person standpoint, anybody can rise up to be a citizen journalism and try to disseminate the truth, because at the end of the day, we all should be truth finders.
Where can people find you, Tara?
You guys can find me on my YouTube channel mainly, and that's On the Ground. And that's where I cover my on the ground footage, formerly the Polish American Brotherhood, but my channel is now On the Ground. And I just launched my first docu-series, and that was covering my recent trip to the border. And I will be releasing pretty soon my footage of Uvalde as well. And that's probably about a 5-part docu-series as well. So also on social media, my handle is PoAm, so spelled exactly how it is down over here in this corner. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and basically everywhere that social media exists. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Tara. And thank you for everybody joining my show today. Thank you very much, Tara, for being a guest on my show. It was an honor to have you. And I just want to say to everybody, I hope you all have a wonderful day. God bless you, and never